Hey everyone, Mark Pellegrino here with my lovely and amazing co-hosts Jacqueline Schumann and Jennifer Buani, and you are watching TV Talk, courtesy of the Ayn Rand Center UK, where we talk about popular and or award-winning TV shows and compare and contrast them with the objective sense of life and or Atlas Shrugged, whatever comes up. It's all grist for the mill, and today we're going to be talking about Breaking Bad. But before we get to that, guys, we have a little unfinished business. We had a poll that we threw out there last week. We got the answers to the poll, and I want to see who won. What was the deal? So I'm going to turn it over to you guys right now to give us the skinny on that.
Yeah, so I don't know. I can't see the screen, so I'm assuming that it's showing. The first one was what was your favorite TV show? And you can see here Sherlock was the audience's favorite TV show, and followed up by Supernatural, and also what we're covering today, Breaking Bad. There's 24. Few people voted for more than one, but thank you for taking the poll last week. We have another poll that we covered also with Fleabag that was more specific. So let's cut over to that one. We asked if the TV strike in the strike TV show, should Dagny be given a flaw that's not in the book to make her more relatable?
Oh,
Yeah.
that's going to ruffle some feathers.
Hero addiction, surprisingly, was the least popular.
What? I thought for sure that was a winner.
And make her a smoker, and the world where everyone knows how bad is for you came in third place. If you touch Dagny's character in any way, I won't watch this show, came in second place.
Ah, there you go.
And the winner is only if that flaw is being awesome. So we have heard it loud and clear. Keep Dagny awesome.
Well, wait a minute, but Sherlock is addicted to cocaine and he's a functional sociopath. Those are about as big of flaws as you can possibly have, and he's still awesome.
That's true. You remember those Maybelline commercials, the "Don't Hate Me Because I'm Beautiful" commercials?
Yes. Is that a Dagny? Is that Dagny now?
That's Dagny. Don't hate me because I'm awesome.
Well, stay tuned for the rest of the show, because we will do another poll at the bottom of the show and ask you for your feedback and how we should do something in the strike. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, that's good. I think some of those answers are pretty good. I definitely don't want to see a heroin addicted Dagny. That's an entirely different show. So I'm glad that was last on the list. Anyway, guys, so today we are going to talk about Breaking Bad. And for anybody, I think most of people out there who are watching this show have probably seen Breaking Bad. If you haven't, break out the earmuffs, guys, because there are guaranteed to be some spoilers here. And I wouldn't want to be that guy.
And Atlas Shrugged spoilers, of course.
Atlas Shrugged spoilers,
Right.
So watch out. The ladies will be taking care of that, of course. But look, I'm going to give you a little background and a little story here because I think it's sort of interesting. So most of you probably know Breaking Bad was a show on AMC from 2008 to 2013. And what I find interesting about that is that's just when these other mini networks were sort of breaking out and coming into their own. AMC was becoming a content creator thanks to HBO. I mean, I think HBO and The Sopranos sort of set the stage for these micro networks, or what at first were micro networks, to start creating really gritty content and challenge the big three, ABC, NBC, and CBS. That's exactly what AMC did, and FX and Showtime and all the ones that came on with some pretty great programming at that time. And of course, that boon precipitated, I think, the streaming phenomenon that we have now, where distributors like Netflix and even Amazon Prime have become content creators in their own right. And now we have an explosion of content out there. There's more television out there now than you could possibly ever get to in one lifetime. And that's because of capitalism, guys, because of the free market. Just like Ayn Rand said, well, it's true. When you open up the market like that, you open up opportunity, you open up innovation, and now we have 5,000 television shows and tons of great content to sort through. But I digress.
I want to interject something with a little history here. Back in the late 80s, I lived in London for a year in the East End, and I was absolutely shocked at here I come from 14 channels in the United States at the time, and then network TV as well. And we had, I think HBO was like just getting started. In England, 4 channels, right?
Yep.
4 channels. And we had to actually we would, and TVs were regulated. So they would have people driving around in vans with satellites out checking to see if you had an unlicensed TV. So, and of course we had an unlicensed TV. So anytime we'd see like the van driving, we'd turn the TV off so that they couldn't see the signal, but just different times when regulation takes over.
Isn't that wonderful? Yeah. Isn't big intrusive government amazing? It does such great things for us. And I remember being in the business. I've been in the business 30 years. I mean, breaking into the business as a young actor in the 80s, mid 80s to late 80s was a very different phenomenon than today. You had select studios that sort of monopolized the industry. You had very few stations that you had to go through a Hollywood process and a real gauntlet in order to get a job. Nowadays, you could do a YouTube video that gets 3 million views and you're represented by the cream of the crop in Hollywood. You can get a contract at CAA. So these multiple streaming platforms have made, I'd say they've brought democracy to the acting world and of course to the viewing world. And I think that's a fantastic thing, but we could go on about that forever. Let's go back to Breaking Bad for a second. Look, that was a series created by Vince Gilligan of X-Files fame. It starred Bryan Cranston in his award-winning portrayal of Walter White. Aaron Paul as the great Jesse Pinkman, Anna Gunn as Skylar White, Betsy Brandt as Marie Schrader, Dean Norris as Hank Schrader, and a host of other great character actors, some of whom you probably see on the current show Better Call Saul, like Bob Odenkirk, Jonathan Banks, and then there's the amazing Giancarlo Esposito, who you could still see today on Amazon Prime's The Boys. Now, before we get into the weeds about some of the particulars of the show, I think it's important for aspiring writers out there to hear how this story came about, because it's sort of interesting to me, and I think as writers and creative types, if you're out there, everything is grist for the mill. Every joke, every experience, every overheard conversation in a coffee house, it becomes your Bible, so to speak, that you draw from and use at some point in your life. So the way this series came about was Vince Gilligan was unemployed for 2 years after the X-Files. I know a lot of people out there probably think that once you get a great job in Hollywood, you're probably set for life, and that's not the case. Vince was a writer on, I think, through the duration or most of the duration of the X-Files, and he couldn't get a job for 2 years. So he's talking to a buddy, his a fellow NYU graduate who is also an alum of the X-Files by the name of Tom Schnoz. I think I'm saying that right, Tom Schnoz. And while they were talking to each other and ruminating over the fact that they couldn't get a job after being on this show, Tom said, "Well, you know what we should do, buddy? We should buy an RV and we should take it around the country and cook meth to make money." He thought it was a joke, but Vince actually, that started percolating in his mind, and he was thinking, wow, I mean, I'm a good guy, Tom's a good guy. What in the fuck would make good guys like us drive around in an IV and cook meth? And so that was sort of the genesis of this great project that we know today as Breaking Bad. So go ahead.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Yeah, I watched an interview with Vince Gilligan in Australia where he talked about the whole phenomenon and about show running, which might be a good show for you guys to catch, because I anticipate you will be running your own show before long, called The Strike.
Definitely going to check that out, because Vince is he's just a master at storytelling. And this particular show is probably one of my favorite TV shows because of his way of bringing together tension and conflict and character arc. And it's just beautifully done. I can't wait to get into the details.
And I hate to say, to hear Vince talk about it, or to hear Bryan Cranston talk about the creative process with Vince with respect to all the elements in the show, whenever he would ask Vince, well, why am I wearing this, or why is this going on, Vince would hem and haw. I don't know. I kind of like it. I thought it looked cool, which sort of highlights a lot of the unconscious nature of creation. I know that we have, as objectivists, like everything to be known quantities all the time and in our control and in our grasp. But there's something to the unconscious creative aspect of.
It's not whimsical either. It's a process that's become so, in a creative person, it's a process that's become so automated that it feels like it's a gut reaction. But it actually, if you step back and think about it, and somebody actually questions you on it, you'll be able to, as a creative, you'll be able to go through that whole process and explain why. But just to say, oh, because I felt like it, that's, maybe some people do that, but for a master like Vince Gilligan, we were talking about this in our pre-call, our pre-show call, just about nothing is on accident. Nothing happen. The colors don't happen on accident. We'll talk about that later. Nothing happens on accident in these things, and sometimes they can be subconsciously done, or sometimes explicitly done.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think even Cranston said that everything in a script is on purpose, and we as objectivists understand that everything in that world is there for a reason. Even if the writer and creator isn't directly aware of the thematic elements or directly aware of the deeper narratives, they're there for a reason. It's satisfying a creative impulse in them, or a thought that maybe they're not too conscious of, but is nonetheless there and has a purpose. So today we can actually talk about a plot.
As opposed to last week.
As opposed to last week. I'm still convinced that Fleabag doesn't have a plot, but maybe I'm wrong. I think you guys agreed with me. But here we have a plot. A high school chemistry teacher gets diagnosed with inoperable lung cancer, and in order to assure that his family has the means to support themselves after his impending death, he starts cooking meth. What could possibly go wrong? Well, lots goes.
Wackiness ensues.
Yes, lots goes wrong, and that's what ends up becoming the substance of the plot. Do you guys want to talk about some of that? Because we can get into the characters, the arcs, the actions that they all go through in an attempt to get themselves out of the shit, which is sort of my favorite writing technique. Put characters in deep shit and see if they can get out of it.
Well, it was one thing after another. And what I loved about watching was that he was always problem solving. And this is very much law of causality here. Like whenever he would do something, it might cause another problem, but he would always have to think and think and think and use his brain and figure his way out. So one of the favorite scenes I have is when the Jesse throws the keys on the workstation, and he's like, no, you got to put it in the RV. He goes and puts it in the RV, and then the battery drains, and they spend the entire episode trying to figure out how to get that RV out of the desert. Yeah,
they're 18 miles away from a road or something hellish like that.
And it's just,
and then later on, when they're trying to start the generator, Jesse, of course, wastes the last of their water on that, putting out the fire of the generator. So they're not only stuck out there without power, without a vehicle that can move, but they're in the middle of the desert with no water.
Yes,
that is a great way to put your characters in jeopardy and see if they can.
Oftentimes, Walter White really reminds me of if MacGyver were evil.
That's great.
He MacGyvers so much, and I love and appreciate that aspect of it, that using science and logic and reason to get out of these scenarios, even though he becomes a horribly evil man.
He did it to get out of a difficult situation with the first drug dealer, the crazy guy. What was his name? Zuko. Tuco, sorry,
Tuco.
where he creates something that looks exactly like meth, but it's really an explosive component.
Oh,
And
that was brilliant.
he uses it as a way of getting out of the situation and leveraging the moment to get what he wants. But Jacqueline, you said that if MacGyver were an evil guy, it would be Walter. But is Walter an evil guy?
I believe he is now a lot of people may disagree with me on this. I'm actually also trying to look at the chat as well for the first time. So I am kind of looking at that, and I may respond to some of the things when they ask them. But a lot of people think that Breaking Bad starts with Walter White as just a good guy, and what happens when a bad thing happens to a good guy and drives him to desperation. But I know a whole lot of people who have been diagnosed with cancer and don't turn to cooking to meth. And, it's not at the top of their mind. I think that I was actually watching something this morning about it. I think he is a bad guy in the making. And that's what's so amazing about his arc. He is a guy who stuff gets done to. He's very passive and inactive when you meet him. He's not pursuing values from an objectivist perspective. He's not pursuing anything, in fact. You can tell that he loves science and he loves chemistry. But when you look at those scenes when he's interacting with his students, he's really not interacting with them. It's almost like he's just talking to a mirror in a sense. He gives this great speech in the beginning of in episode 1. That's actually the theme for the entire show.
Yes, I love that.
Chemistry and how it's nothing but change, and then it explodes and then it degrades, and it's like that's the whole show. That's the arc of the entire show. And
right. which would make who's the author of Save the Cat, which we're probably going to talk about a little bit later on. Blake. I don't want to say Blake Edwards. He's a great director, but Blake Schneider, that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah, Blake Schneider would say something like that would be not a Save the Cat moment, but a moment of Save the Cat-esque style where you state the theme very early on in the screenplay, almost explicitly. And in this case, it was done as a form of exposition talking about chemistry, but it's really about about a character that rises and falls and then rises again. And it was done as an analogy to chemistry, which I thought was a brilliant way of approaching the part.
It is. And you think that, and it's kind of misleading because it seems like you think, oh, he's a teacher. He's passionate about being a teacher. But really what I think, he's passionate about people knowing how smart he is and how brilliant he is. And that is something that plagues him for the entire series. And you see, even in episode 1, you see his aggression come out when his son, Walt Jr., who suffers from cerebral palsy, is getting teased in a department store because his parents have to actually help him put his pants on. And Walt is so infuriated by his son getting picked on, and it's valid, right? But you see the aggression because he walks out the back door, walks into the front where these high school jocks are making fun of Walt Jr., looks at them and like kicks him in the back of the knee so that they can feel what it's like to not be able to walk. And the look on his face, the look on Bryan Cranston's face is like, oh, this is power. And that's right there in episode 1. So don't tell me he started out as a good guy because this is even before he gets diagnosed with cancer.
That's interesting. I have a sort of a take on that as well. What do you think, Jennifer? Do you think he was a good guy who turned bad, or does he turn bad? I mean, he starts to have an arc at the end of season 2 and in season 3 especially, has a massive arc with respect to Jesse, where I have a lot more sympathy for him as a character. But what's your take on Walter White from the beginning?
It's funny because this was my second time watching the series, and the first time was a different experience than the second time. The first time, I just thought he was a good guy who was turning bad. watching him slowly make these choices, and they were understandable choices. Like you could feel his love for his family, and that's how I saw it the first time. But the second time through, knowing how it ends, I was less sympathetic towards him, and I did see those moments very early on. I think he takes it out on some douchebag in a bank. Like maybe by episode 3, he's already like doing things, and I started to begin to feel for Skylar a lot more the second go round, and for Jesse, and to have a lot of empathy for the people around him who were going through this. And yes, it seems like very early on, he was high on that power that he was getting, and he just hadn't experienced it before.
Yeah,
But
so I'm sort of in Jack's camp as well. When I first, I saw the series all the way through a number of years ago, probably 2012, 13. And I got up to season 3 this time around because that's 62 hours of television that I have to get through, and I couldn't get through all of it.
I pulled an all-nighter and finished season 5 last
You're
night.
a stud. You're a stud. But when I first saw it, I thought it was a sort of rendition of the Lord Acton saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I thought, here's a guy who got in touch with a form of absolute power, and it corrupted him. But I don't really buy that maxim. I think that it's not power that corrupts, it's the people themselves who are attracted to power, who are already corrupt, who get in positions where they can exercise their sickness. But I thought by the time he had attacked that kid, and by the time he burned that douchebag's car up in the gas station, he was already he already knew what was going on with him. He was already sort of on that path, right? So it didn't happen before. It happened after he was diagnosed, correct?
after the diagnosis, yeah.
What do you mean? What happened after he was diagnosed?
The loosening of his anger. I mean, if you're a guy,
Because you could see when he attacked the kid, that was in episode 1 before he gets diagnosed.
I didn't think he would have the courage to do that before, because I think the alter ego is starting to come up by the time he does something like that, or he's already sort of embracing that idea of fighting like a samurai, fight as if you're already dead, and he's not letting things slide the way he would before. Because if you think about Walter White in the very beginning, I've heard Bryan Cranston describe his facial hair. It's like a mustache that's almost not there. It's an impotent mustache that sort of reflects how impotent he is in life, and that can really dig at a man, right? That can really dig at a man and fester and become something pretty toxic later on. So maybe we're in agreement, Jax. I just don't remember when that took place.
Well, he had many moments. The first moment was before he found out that he had cancer, where his anger just flashes. It comes out in it doesn't come out in the controlled, powerful way that it does after he finds out that he has cancer. It's an uncontrolled. It's like a child throwing a temper tantrum. Because before there were 2 scenes. There were when he gets when he kicks the kid who's making fun of his son. And then the other one is in the car wash, when I just call him Eyebrows, right? Everybody calls him the Eyebrows guy that owns the car wash, when he's getting humiliated there, and he gets so angry, he like grabs at his crotch and like flings the thing. But soon after that, he collapses. I believe it's at the car wash. And when he collapses, that's when he gets taken to the hospital, and when he finds out that he has cancer.
Right. But he's suffering one indignity after another. He's he's like a potential that never actualized. I mean, when you see in the house the plaque that he was a part of a team that got the Nobel Prize for their whatever technique it was they discovered with respect to
radioactive proton something with radiation,
something like that. Yeah, you see that the man never ever really reached his potential, And that's still somewhat of a mystery, even by season 3 on out. Is it ever resolved by season 5? What exactly went wrong?
In season 5, he talks about, so in season 5, which is another, I think like season 4 and season 5, he just gets worse and worse. I mean, he just becomes more and more evil. Even, and I used to think with only having watched it the first time around and without having watched the last episode, like I did last night, actually a couple times, or just parts of it a couple times. What is interesting is Jesse's trying to get him out of the business. They have this opportunity. They've just done the train heist, and a brilliant episode. And they've stolen this methylamine. Jesse wants to sell it. Jesse and Mike want to sell their portion of it for $5 million a piece and get out of the business. But Walt is like, no, I'm not selling my part, because, and Jesse is trying to remind him, like, dude, you got into this when you had cancer, trying to make money for your family. You've got more money than you know what to do with now. Why not just get out? And Walt sits there and says, Jesse, I'm not in the money business. I'm not in the meth business. I'm in the empire business. And it's just like, you know, he just becomes this insanely, like, I think he becomes he becomes himself. He becomes more himself. Every season he becomes more himself.
Well, with the exception, I would say, of season 3, where you see a little dance take place, and I think a reversal of sorts, where Walter White becomes more of a human. He seems to get back more to his essence and back into caring for his family and putting these more or less human goals as making these human goals as a priority, instead of, you know, being the big badass out there. And Jesse embraces his criminality and sort of goes off in another direction, and Walter ends up saving his life. You see for the first time an actual connection between the two of them from Walter's point of view, where you didn't see that before. So I feel like, and I think that's very good writing, where you see one guy starting to descend into hell, and then lift up and change and even experience a sort of metamorphosis in the 3rd season, and then probably pushed to the very edge at the end of season 3, where I think Jesse commits that murder and saves his life, right? Saves Walter's life, to prolong his life for Gus, where they do those amazing tango that they do in acting, where there's a turn and twist at the end of the season. So I thought there was a break. The long and short of what I'm trying to say is, I thought there was a break in season 3 where we were acquainted again with the humanity of Walter White. We thought was being irretrievably lost, right?
We probably had to have it too, right? Because how could we stand to watch him go any further without some redeemable qualities?
Which is true, you know, and also I think we had to have that episode called The Fly. Do you guys remember that episode?
Oh yeah,
that episode.
It almost seems like it doesn't belong. But then it's a necessary reprieve. It's a break between all this horror and more horror to come. We have a comedic, almost an entire episode of physical comedy, with a little bit of philosophy thrown in for good measure. But I thought season 3 was an interesting twist, and I'd like to see where it goes in season 4 and 5. But what do you think about Jesse? Since we talked about Jesse now. We see Walter's character arc is sort of like Macbeth, and what's Jesse's story?
Jesse, like I said, Jesse the second time around really became a really intriguing character, more so than the first time. I mean, he was good, but I really honed in on him, and I think one of the things that, for 2 reasons, one, he made the comedy between the two of them, bickering back and forth, was just hilarious. And as I watched it over the course, I got to the middle of season 4 the second time around, and it just was getting darker and darker. And we had less and less of that bickering that was so funny. And it became harder to watch because of that. So that was really important. But in his arc, he's the one that seems to have heart. And even though he's struggling and he's the meth head, he is the one who cares about people. He cares about the guys working under them getting arrested or getting killed. This really affects him. It sends him into a spiral. And the most
He's in love with his
moment,
he's in love with his girlfriend.
yeah, the girlfriend that he ends up kind of influencing her and falling off the wagon, and he feels terrible about it. But the moment that he has to go back and sit, I think Walt had told him, you can't, he just wanted to like blow off that they had been stolen, robbed. And Walt was like, no, you need to go deal with it. And so he interpreted their lack of communication. He interprets it as, I've got to go rough up these meth heads that robbed us. And he ends up in their house and he's sitting there waiting on them. Nobody's home. And he's sitting, and I think we have a clip we can show of this moment. Can we show the clip of the
Save the Cat moment?
Okay, so wait, let's show that. Let's show that in a second, because that brings us to a couple of things with respect to the things that we wanted to talk about and relate to the strike, because I think it's important to relate these things to the strike. First of all, I think objectivists in general can tend to shy away from humor, and I know Ayn Rand had issues with that. Now, you can see in a show like this that's just a spiral into hell. It's darkness, 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 darkness.
Hey, can you pause the? Sorry, Mark. I'm just watching it on the other screen. Can we pause that clip while we talk about this real quick, and maybe back it up a bit?
Dylan, can you pause and rewind?
Yeah. Okay, go, Mark.
Oh, so I think this show, if anything, highlights the importance of humor, especially in a show that's mostly filled with darkness. How important it is for us as an audience to keep following the narrative, because there's these humorous signposts that keep us there. And one of the great ways in which Vince Gilligan did that was to put The Odd Couple together, right? Two opposites together, and watch what happens when you put problems in their way and watch them try to solve them in their own ways. And that's pretty doggone pretty funny. Well, and I think, how can that be used, say, in the strike? I know that's such a huge question and maybe it's impossible to answer, but can you use those elements of humor, of the odd couple kind of contrasts to make moments funny in the strike?
I absolutely think so. I think there are many, you can't do anything that's slapstick, but there are moments, especially I think with the villains, you can have some really good comedic moments among villains who are fighting with themselves. If you look at Atlas Shrugged, I think there are plenty of opportunities between Oren Boyle and Jim Taggart and Wesley Mooch to have some like bickering and actually I think that some of those moments are actually already there in the book. They just need to be brought out a little bit.
I'm all for making them Keystone Cops. I think evil should be lampooned, and I think that's a very original way to approach evil. And I think it also took some of the steam out of Walter. It humanized him in a way that made us still on his side, even though he's a psychopath. What do you think, Jen? Oh, what were you going to say, Jax?
Oh no, I was actually just going to queue up Jennifer for the Save the Cat moment, but maybe first we should explain what Save the Cat actually means for those who haven't read that book or aren't familiar with that term.
Oh yeah, sure. There's one more comment about the comedy. I do think in Atlas Shrugged, we've got we're going to have a dystopian world it's going to get worse and worse, and there's going to be some sort of darkness to us. It won't be in the same vein as Breaking Bad, but I think that the use of using comedy will be important, and we will definitely be keeping that in mind.
Yeah, it certainly won't be hells of their own making. It'll be hells that they have to deal with.
Right, and how do you deal with it? And I know already in the pilot script that we wrote, I think Eddie's pretty funny the way that we've written him. So yeah, we'll let the judge, you guys be the judges one day. But no, so in Save the Cat, that's a story device technique that writers use is usually done. If it's just a movie, it's usually done once at the very beginning, and it's the main character that you're following usually does something to show compassion for something, and it doesn't have to be done as altruism at all. And in fact, I think as an objectivist, when they're not using altruism, but they show compassion, it's the more effective. But it's basically they're saving a cat, and that's the metaphor.
Tree, yeah, they saved the cat up in the tree.
So then you're like, oh, that person has a heart. That's nice. And I particularly noticed in Breaking Bad, it wasn't until there are little moments here, but the one that really stood out was this clip here. And like I said, this is where Jesse, he's going to make the robbery right, and he's at the meth head's house waiting for them to show up so that he can like rough them up a little bit and get his money or his meth back.
Okay, so let's show the clip now.
Was that the end?
I couldn't see it. I'm hoping the audience could see it. So
I am too.
I'm watching it. We can see it. Yeah, it's the end now.
It's the end. Okay. Yeah. So this moment really sums up. It was the beginning. What happened right after that is he started talking to this poor little kid, and all of that fell on his shoulders. And here he ends up protecting him. He has a sandwich with him. He's talking to him. And this represented who Jesse was deep down inside and why we cared about him, because he goes through a lot, and he kills people, and he goes through a terrible relapse in his addiction. But he continuously is caring about these people that are affected by this world that he feels responsible for in some way, because he's contributing to it. So this was, I don't know, do you guys think of any other save the cat moments in Breaking Bad?
Oh, sure. When he gets the girl first of all, when he saves his own brother from being found out by his parents that his little brother is smoking dope, he protects him. He takes the heat because the parents think he brought the pot into the house, and they end up completely disowning him, and he still doesn't crack, and he throws the joint on the floor and breaks it up and tells him it's skunk weed, and then leaves.
Yeah,
that was really the first save the cat moment for me. And then of course the in the crack house was even more profound. But then when he gets that lover from the meeting, from the NA meeting that he goes to, and she has a kid and a brother. You can the way he reacts when she wants to get high, and he knows now that she has a kid, and also the reaction that he has once he finds out his friend who was working for him was killed by a mule that was actually an 11-year-old kid who was used by the cartel to do all their dirty work for him. And that's what sends him on a revenge path to get these two guys, and even sends him to a very self-destructive place where he is going to die in a confrontation between these two guys, because they murder that 11-year-old, and he's saved by Walter White. There's a beautiful scene in there where he stands up to Gus, the drug lord, and refuses to bend. He's in a meeting with the two guys, the two murderers, a henchman, with the henchman for Gus, and Gus is telling him to make amends, and he's like, nope, these guys are using an 11-year-old kid. Fuck that. And he stands up to them, and Walter White can't. Walter is shrinking. He's turtling up, and this kid does. Those are all moments that show that Jesse's really a guy with heart and deep integrity. that
Yeah.
maybe never really had a chance because of where he's from. That might not roll well with objectivists, but for that to come out, and I think those are really beautiful moments. Now the question is, should Dagny have a save the cat moment? Does she have a save the cat moment?
I think she absolutely does have the save the cat moment in both the book and in the pilot episode that we wrote. And that's the very first moment that you see her on the train, and she's listening to Richard Haley, and she's described as being just so alive, and she's got this like look of sort of serene happiness on her face. And you don't know, of course, if you're reading it for the first time, you don't know who this woman is. You just know, here's this beautiful woman on a train. She could be some entitled person or whatever, beautiful person on a passenger train. And the train stops, of course, and she gets out and tells asks the conductor what's wrong. And he's basically like, sorry, who are you to tell me this? And she doesn't say who she is. She doesn't name drop herself. She just says, here's what you need to do to fix the train and get it moving again and get the passenger train. And somebody kind of whispers, I think, to the conductor, to the engineer, that's Dagny Taggart. She owns this railroad. and you have this moment of like, oh my God, this unassuming woman is just like, she literally saves the train, right? She saves and in our pilot, like I said, we're using autonomous trucks, and we have sort of a similar type of scenario where she's something's broken down and it's blocking the bridge, and she gets it moving again in sort of the same way, and people are kind of cheering her on. So
well, she's a rock star in that for sure. Now, I think maybe objectivists can redefine compassion then. I mean, most people look at compassion as feeling for the vulnerable and doing something special, going that extra step for the vulnerable. But maybe we can widen that moral arc a little bit and actually give passion to people who aren't vulnerable, quote unquote, but are actually strong and who actually shoulder a great deal of responsibility. And, the Dagnys of the world deserve compassion too.
Exactly.
And so maybe I like that save the cat moment is different than the one Blake Schneider would describe, but just as interesting. So let's talk about Skylar White. Who's she, and what's her story? Now, I found her very interesting the second time around. I don't know that she appealed to me as much as she does this time around. I found her to be a powerful and consistent moral voice. She is really, really powerful, and especially from the middle of the third season after Hank gets injured, it's the women that really carry the men in many ways and save their asses. So talk about that, and why is that? Do you agree, first of all, and is that relevant to the way we can do an interesting, diverse film with respect to the strike?
It's interesting because I watched Breaking Bad probably around the same time, maybe a few years after you did, Mark. And I remember the first time through just hating Skylar, like, God, this bitch, why is she like, just let, Walt is dying of cancer, and just, man, let him become a man. I wasn't seeing the real arcs and the progressions and the morality of her. And this time around, I think we all had that same experience where it was like, oh my God, she is the moral backbone. If there's anybody who is doing anything right in this, I mean, here you've got Maria, kleptomaniac, and Hank is, overall a good guy, but kind of an egomaniac as well. And Skylar is the good guy. But I watched Breaking Bad like the first 3 seasons with my daughter this time, my 15-year-old daughter, and she was like, man, Skylar, she bugs me so much. And I was like, that was my reaction too. But dude, look at what she's doing. Look at this in the context. And Skylar has been, there's news articles, right, about how Skylar is the most hated character. Still, the most hated character on Breaking Bad.
let me ask you a question. How much of your appreciation for Skylar do you think comes from your objectivist roots? Because I mean,
I think a huge amount, actually.
Yeah.
But also, I think it comes from my objectivist roots, but I will also say from motherhood.
Yeah, I would agree. It's experience that I've had since the first time I've watched it.
Yeah.
You can put yourself in her shoes and go, what would I do if that was the case? And there's this moment where she's sitting on the couch. I think it was season 2 with Walt. He was cooking up breakfast, and he had just come back from his 3-day fugue state or whatever. And he's cooking up breakfast and acting like nothing, everything's great. And she's all of a sudden realizing that he is probably something else went on. And so she has this heart to heart with him on the couch, and she's like wanting so badly for him to just come clean on the bullshit. And he's like, he has that moment, and they're staring at each other, and he continues with the bullshit.
And he says, like, but if I come clean, there's no series.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, she never takes her eye off the prize. Her values are always her family. Her values are always her son and her daughter, and her sister and her brother-in-law, and she never loses sight of that. Whereas Walter starts out supposedly with the idea that he's doing what he's doing to leave a legacy to his family, but then becomes a corrupt person, and loses complete sight of it. Becomes a sort of a power lusting.
She has a great quote. I think it was maybe season 4 where he's like giving her that runaround about how he's doing this for the family. And she's like, I forgot exactly what it was, but it was something to the effect of, I am saving this family from the man who's saving the family. It was perfect.
And that's precisely what she's doing.
I'm protecting this family from the man.
Protecting, thank you.
Yeah.
From the man who's protecting this family.
She is not to be trifled with. She is truly great. But Marie, who's sort of a feckless, she seems like one of the most superficial characters to me in the piece. She picks up the slack after Hank is injured, and she becomes something pretty significant to me. I loved how she got him out of the hospital.
Oh yeah,
yes, that was great.
Yeah, there's nothing that a hand job can't solve, right?
So we could talk about these characters and their arcs all day, because the arcs are truly fantastic. They're metamorphosis for everybody. They really do go from one thing to another, and sometimes back again. And there's all kinds of change in there that's very interesting to watch. But I want to hit a couple more points before we have to get to our survey and conclude. I want to say a couple of more good observations about this integration of film technique with the story and how that mattered. Color was a very good use of color, and music, I think, very, very interesting use of music in the filming style. What do you guys have to say about that? And then I want to say, I don't want to end it on a bad note, but I do want to say one reservation that I have with respect to the writing that sort of there's a couple actually that glare at me a little bit, and I want to see if you guys feel the same way. So what do you think about this use of color schemes in this set decoration, the way the characters are dressed, and even in the saturation of light and the color of the film that they use at various times?
I think that this show makes a tremendously good use of color in a way that's not just a camera filter. So it's funny, Jennifer and I did not coordinate our outfits today, but we happened to both be wearing the colors of season 3 and season 4.
This is the color of the drug dealers and
red and purple. And of course in comic bookville, purple is the color of the villain. And you see, which is interesting because Marie, like everything in her house is purple, like just everything is, she probably has purple trash bags. So there's, well,
that's also the color of royalty, isn't it?
Yes, red, definitely red and purple color of royalty. And it's interesting that in comic book, they take that and turn it into villains. But there's and also the use of beige. So when we beiges and neutrals and browns, when we see Walter for the first time, and as he is coming into his own, there's a lot of beige and brown, and kind of in their house is like, drab kind of thing, as compared to Marie's, that's all purple and light. And as Walter gets more and more into his Jekyll and Hyde Heisenberg personality, his colors become more bold. He gets blacks and reds and burgundies. And then in seasons 4 and 5, so at some point, so Walt finally does get out of the meth business, because he's lost everything. He's lost the love of his family. He's lost just everything, and he gets out of it. And for a time, he runs the car wash with Skylar. And the whole time that he's in that persona, he is dressed in beige. Both of them are dressed in beige for probably an entire season. And the one episode where Skylar, this is in season 5, where they have a terrible fight, and she takes a knife and like slashes his hand, tells him to get out, and Walt Jr. is there, and he's attacking her. Walt Jr. calls the police on them and protects his mother. So this is the first time, that Walt sees his father for the monster that he is, and which I think is brilliant. But she's wearing all beige except for 2 little like purple cuffs on her shirt, and it's like, that stuff is not on accident. So I think they make a brilliant use of that. Jennifer, what do you think?
Yeah, I noticed it specifically. I think it was season 2 when I was always bothered by their drabby house, but he had decided with Jesse, they were done cooking meth. They just had to sell off what they had, and they were going to be out of the business. This was I think he was in remission. So he goes back. This is the episode where he's like trying to make his life work again, and he's angry. He's kind of mad that he's in remission, I guess, or he's mad that he doesn't have an excuse to be making meth, and he's just building. I think he ends up in this episode having a big tequila fight with Hank out by the pool. But you can see, like, besides the drabby browns, like they've got brown sludge coming out of the water heater, and then like Skylar's making tea, it's like brown water. It's just blah. I'm like, I can't do this. I need adventure. I need excitement. And you're right, he wears red after that. Season 3, the floor of the lab is red. Jesse's always in red. Jesse drives red cars. Jesse's got a red phone, and then he's Walt's adopting red shirts. And yeah. And then I think Skylar was wearing green a lot. I saw. She really.
So one of the things maybe that I want to get to is, because I don't think we're going to get to all of our clips, but it is this would be Dylan, if you can cue up maybe the second I Am the One Who Knocks clip. And I'll just, because this goes toward the colors that we're just talking about, as well as the transformation into this as Walt's transformation and becoming Heisenberg. To give a little backstory on this, he's just gotten like really drunk the night before and said some really stupid stuff to Hank, out of his egomania. And Skylar is lecturing him in the morning. He's wearing this long burgundy shirt, under which is a deeper purple shirt. And he's in the persona of Walter, where he's got his head down, and Skylar is like, just go to the police and tell them that, that you got roped into this. I mean, you're nobody, you're in danger. I'm afraid of people coming to knock on the door. And one of those days that person is gonna hurt us, and just tell them that, you've got cancer, you're a chemist, you're not some mastermind, you're not some brilliant man. And Walt goes through the transformation to be Heisenberg before her very eyes. And that's what's so brilliant about Anna Gunn acting this is she doesn't really say a word to his speech, but her reaction is critical. So Dylan, if you can roll the second, I am the one who knocks.
Please, let's both of us stop trying to justify this whole thing and admit you're in danger.
Who are you talking to right now? Who is it you think you see? Do you know how much I make a year? I mean, even if I told you, you wouldn't believe it. Do you know what would happen if I suddenly decided to stop going into work? A business big enough that it could be listed on the NASDAQ goes belly up. Disappears. It ceases to exist without me. No, you clearly don't know who you're talking to, so let me clue you in. I am not in danger, Skylar. I am the danger. A guy opens his door and gets shot, and you think that of me? No. I am the one who knocks.
That is a man who is seriously grandiose, might I say.
Hey, Mark, I've been noticing we've got like a couple of super chat questions.
Yeah, go ahead. I can't see them, so you might as well.
So let me try and run through them. I know we've been thanking everybody for thank you everybody for your super chat contributions that are there's one from Jeff that says keep it up, one from Zalmi that I can't read, but thank you. And then one from LMH saying this is really interesting and I haven't even watched Breaking Bad. Awesome. Go watch it. And then let's see, there's one from, I am so going to kick this question off to you, Mark. This is from Philosophy at Work. The earlier poll results suffer from the Moderno-centric predicament. The best book adaptation for TV is Jack Pullman's I, Claudius from the 70s. Would love to hear your take on it.
Well, you shouldn't take that one off to me because I don't remember that adaptation, but okay. I would like to look at it.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Remember in the 70s, I was still a little boy, and I, Claudius, wouldn't have grabbed me.
Jeff Bannister asks a good question. Don't you think Cheryl has that benevolent arc of change when she rights her wrongs with Dagny in the end? So Jennifer, you want to answer that?
Cheryl's one of my favorite characters. We are so excited about writing her. But yeah, I mean, Jax, I don't know what you want to say, but
I agree. I think that Cheryl is one of the most interesting characters that has a really great arc, and Ayn Rand wrote her perfectly, in my opinion. She goes through and this whole time, you know, she's kind of the Jesse to Jim Taggart's Walt in a way. In the sense that she thinks, because in the same way Jesse looks up to Walt and kind of idolizes him, there comes a moment when Jesse realizes that Walt is a monster. And it's that moment when they've just killed the kid from the train heist. Jesse didn't do it. Walt didn't do it. It was another guy that was there, but Jesse is just sick with grief and guilt. And Walt tries to comfort him. They're cooking meth at, like, they've set up their rolling pest control, their pest tent meth lab, and they're cooking meth at some person's house. And Walt is like, "Oh, Jesse, why don't you just go home? You know, it's just been really rough." And it seems to be a very, very tender, wonderful moment between these two. And Jesse is like, he looks at Walt like he's a father to him. And then Walt says, "Go home, I'll finish the cook." And Walt puts on his gear and starts whistling, like, "Whistle while you work." And you see him doing that. And the look on Jesse's face is like, oh my God, this man has no empathy. And it's that same realization that Cheryl has, that, you know, oh my God, the man that I married is a bloody nihilistic monster.
Devastating. That is devastating. That's awesome. Yeah, I can't wait to see how you guys develop that character.
We're really looking forward to it. So the last super chat question that we have, it's not a question, it's just from LMH saying, I love this discussion about the use of color. Thank you. That's awesome.
Oh, good. And I also wanted to say something really quickly about music, because I listened to Vince Gilligan talk about it a little bit. And the way they approached the music was that it had to have an organic purpose in the piece, as most people should approach music, as most people should approach any aspect of this type of art. It should have to be there. Rand's right when she talks about that stuff, in my opinion. And so they never wanted to use music as a means of manipulating emotional effects for the audience. They never wanted to tell the audience how to feel, which I think is great. I think great writing is not telling the audience how to feel. It's just showing, doing the action, doing the thing, putting them in the circumstances, in the shit, so to speak, and let them draw their own conclusions on your own. That takes a lot of courage as a writer, for sure, as an actor as well.
Absolutely.
To be in that world. But I wanted to have, before we end, because we have to end right now, I wanted to talk about one massive quibble that I have with this nearly perfectly done series. And I think it is perfectly done. These arcs are amazing and transformational. Every aspect of the piece has a great deal of integrity, in the sense that it all fits together the way a story should. But God damn it, I hate the coincidences. The coincidence, and then the attempt to tie up some of that in one of the episodes through an expositional scene. It just made me feel weird. Okay, coincidence numero uno, which is a huge coincidence. Okay, so we watch Walter White's soul sink even further when he goes over to Jesse's house, and Jesse's in a heroin daze. He's asleep with his girlfriend, and he shakes him up, and the girlfriend falls onto her back. There's already been a setup where she talked about how he has to sleep on his side in case he throws up. It's a beautiful setup, so we know something is going to happen with respect to that. It pays off in her doing it right in front of Walter, and he's confronted with the dilemma of either saving her and risking himself, because she's going to be the fly in the ointment all the way down the line. They've set that up beautifully, or letting her die, and he lets her die. But I think the same day he goes into a bar, and randomly at the bar, there's her dad.
Yeah. That one bothered me, actually.
Okay, that's a bad one. That's a huge one. And then, of course, later on down the line, the dad goes back to work as an air traffic controller, and because he's so distressed and distraught over the death of his daughter, ends up causing a midair collision, which kills 100 some odd people, which then falls on Walter because of what he did, and he knows he's responsible in a sense for those deaths. And he comes up, it's a 2-episode or 3-episode thing where he's trying to rationalize this phenomenon that he's essentially responsible for. And I like the sort of mechanistic universe chain of events kind of thing, where bad things set off other bad things, right?
Yeah.
Vices set off other vices and encourage other vices. That's great. I hated the coincidence of seeing the dad and having them have a scene together. Now that is repeat.
They didn't need that scene, actually. I think that they.
You're right. They probably, well, I think they did because Walter needs to feel responsible for the deaths of all those people. It's not.
Yeah.
Now it's not just a drug dealer that he's strangling to save his own life.
Yeah.
Now 150 people have died because of him, because of a really sinful, horrible thing that he did. But that's not the only one. There's another huge one. I mean, Jesse goes to rehab, and then he embraces the fact that he's a criminal and ends up going to meetings, drug meetings. And he ends up going there with the purpose, in some respects, of selling drugs to some of these people.
Yeah, I love that.
Right? Because he's embracing his criminality. He's just embracing his criminality. But he meets this girl. This girl has a boy and a brother. Now, this brother happened to be the kid who killed his dealer friend. And that sets off the whole chain of events here. Now, I find that a crazy coincidence, too. He happens to be in an AA meeting or an NA meeting in Albuquerque, New Mexico, happens to run into the girl who happens to be the sister of the mule who killed his good friend. And that starts a whole nother series of awful events off. I'm sorry, I don't like that.
I forgive it more than you do, because I think one of the brilliant things with the entire show is you see consequences. You see constant continue, like is when Walt becomes Heisenberg, he does not do a single positive thing for anybody that he touches. Everybody gets hurt by Walt. Skylar gets destroyed. Walt's son eventually loses all respect for him. Hank nearly dies. Marie becomes even more of a kleptomaniac, and because of what's going on between her and Hank as a result of what Walter has done. Jesse would have been so much better in life had he not met Walt. So I'm okay with that's like an art to me. That is, if the show wasn't so brilliantly done, I probably would have nitpicked on it. But it was kind of like, yeah, the plane falls directly out of the sky on Walt. You know what I mean?
and that too. Yeah, that too. The debris field right over them.
Right.
Anyway, that was.
Yeah, they can get away with it though, because the theme is the consequences, you know.
Sure,
so
that's a thematic element for sure.
Yeah.
Well, guys, it's a great show, and if you haven't seen Breaking Bad, it's 5 seasons. It's a great investment. It's a hell of a ride. We can use a lot of the things, a lot of the techniques and ideas and story type arcs that they put in there, and apply them to the filmic version of Atlas Shrugged. I think we have. Do we have a survey? Huh?
We have a poll.
Yeah, we have a poll.
We want to put a poll out there before we have to take off, guys, and then announce.
And it's based on and then we'll jump over to Clubhouse, I think.
But then we have to announce. We have to announce the next show.
We have to announce the next show before that. But Jennifer, did you want to set up the reason for these poll questions?
With this particular one or in general?
Yeah, just because Breaking Bad had spinoffs. And Breaking Bad had 2 spinoffs. There was one with Better Call Saul is the big one, and then the other one was El Camino with telling Jesse's story more. So we just thought it would be kind of funny to ask a question about Atlas Shrugged spinoffs. So I'll let you.
Is the link out there? Did everyone have a chance to get on to the poll?
I see. Yes, I see. Okay. It looks like it's in the chat. So if we can bring up, Dylan, if you can bring up on the screen the poll questions so that we can read it. Is it? I'm not seeing it up on the screen yet, Dylan. Are you sharing? There it is. All right, go ahead and read it, Jennifer.
If The Strike had a spinoff show, which character or show would you most likely tune in to see? So the first option is the Peg Leg Theater starring Ragnar. Don't ask me how to pronounce that last name.
Daniskoll.
And Kay Ludlow, a 1-hour dramedy.
Oh, wait, you missed the very first one, Eddie and Cheryl's.
Oh, mine's in a different order. Sorry. Why don't you read since you can see the order?
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'm gonna do this then. Okay. All right. So the first one is Eddie and Cheryl's Excellent Adventures, in which Cheryl has faked her death. It's a 1-hour drama. Second one is Peg Leg Theater, starring Ragnar Danisjold and Kay Ludlow, a 1-hour dramedy. Number 3, Three's Enough Company with John Dagny and Little John Galt. It's a 1.5-hour sitcom. Fourth one is Check Your Ingredients, a cooking show with philosophy subtext starring Dr. Hugh Axton, a 1/2-hour unscripted reality show, and it's educational. Next one is The Rejected, starring Francisco d'Anconia and Hank Reardon, a 1-hour police procedural. And then Desperate Housewives of the Hamptons with Lillian Reardon and Betty Pope, a 1-hour reality show. So there you guys have it.
We just lost our audience. So what's the next TV show that we have to watch over this week? Hopefully it's not 70,000 hours of watching, so I can actually watch the entire thing.
I think it is a mere 4 hours.
Yay!
Another Russian Doll.
Russian Doll. I love that show. Okay, that'll be something fun to look forward to, guys. So watch Russian Doll between now and next Friday. This has been Mark Pellegrino, Jennifer Buoni, and Jacqueline Schumann on TV Talk. We'll see you next week, folks. Bye.
We'll see you guys over on Clubhouse.